I'm Liz, this is Blitz City DIY, and today, on episode 3 of Prime Things I Learned This Week, I'm going to be discussing audio, but from a more theoretical side. I thought I'd discuss an adjustment I've been making recently in my thought process for audio. But first, I got into audio production, recording, basically tech in general, because of music. I was in stupid little punk bands in junior high and high school, and of course we wanted to record our stuff, and because we were punks both stylistically and as human beings, we latched onto the idea of do-it-yourself with whatever you have, and really that whole ethic that exists in punk music. And for a really long time, until I was about 19, I started when I was about 13, my recording rig was a AA battery-powered 1080 condenser mic that I got for about $30 in a dynamic mic housing, so just like a normal handheld stick mic housing. And that went into a 1/4-inch audio input via a 1/4-inch to XLR cable. And that input was on a USB interface, probably like USB 1, that only had one volume control, and it kind of looked like the knob off a washing machine. And I don't think it cost much more than the mic. And the software was actually some freeware, and mid-2000s it was coded masterfully. And it was some nameless program that basically just got the job done. And now, over the years, obviously my setup has changed, but my mindset really hasn't. It's all about what's going to get the job done with what you already have. And I will never be impressed by high-priced equipment. If anything, I'll be way more impressed by low-priced equipment or non-traditional equipment and setups, because manipulating and setting up or making and modding cheap, readily available stuff is what shows real skill when it comes to recording, in my opinion. Anyone can walk into a fully spec'd out studio, play a couple of chords on the piano, and have it sound good. I'm much more interested in someone producing something that sounds good with almost nothing and in less than ideal conditions, because that's really where my passion for production and tech is deeply rooted. It's about that ethos, the process, and the perspective where you're coming from during the whole thing. Now, just to change gears a little bit, I'm going to talk more about perspective, and depending on the application of a project, you're going to approach it differently. And up until very recently, my application has been music, and only music, as far as personal projects go. And there are certain technical instincts I have when I'm editing music, you know? My go-to effects are EQ, reverb, funky plugins to try to get sound unique, but also fit the mix. For me, it's all about the overall sound, and I always do a lot of sends to trigger sine tones to cover different parts of the audio spectrum, things like that. But audio for video is a totally different animal, and I really hadn't done a lot of audio for video outside of, work since college. And even in college, I really wasn't thinking from an audio for video vantage point. I was still coming from the music side, and there are certain effects I avoid like the plague when I'm editing music. And please keep in mind, though, audio is such a subjective medium, and these are just my personal preferences from my experience and also from what I'm trying to accomplish when I'm working on it. And so for the effects that I avoid, I really don't use compression on individual tracks, because I think it can make things sound a little bit too compressed, since I'm usually going for a more open sound. And I don't use noise cancellation, because the noise from an amp or an effect is often adding more to the overall sound. And I don't normalize, because it takes away dynamics, and I don't think about mono versus stereo signals. I just mic it how I think it'll sound best for the mix. But if you would like to think about mono versus stereo signals, please feel free to check out last week's episode of Prime Things. But anyway, back on track, so to speak. In video, for sound, the voiceover has a permanent solo. There isn't any blending, there isn't a tone, there isn't a style, there's nowhere to hide, it's just a voice. And DIY or not, it has to sound like a clean voice when you're doing straight ahead informative videos like I am. At first, I wasn't really doing much post on my voice. I was just kind of leaving it as is, because I'm used to thinking about instruments and how I want them to sound, and the voice, I just wanted it to sound like a voice recorded. And I'll be honest, it sounded a little bit meh. So I knew I needed to improve it, so I started thinking about how a voice records compared to instruments and where it's falling on the audio spectrum. And what was missing when I was listening to the videos what I wanted to hear more of and what would have made it sound more satisfying to me. And the answer was that I basically started using every effect that I just said I avoid when mixing music. And the results were pretty great, actually. But it felt odd, you know. There was a lot of trial and error. It's kind of like if you tell a liberal to think like a conservative. It just feels kind of weird and disorienting. But it's been about 3 weeks now since I launched the channel, and this week I really felt like I got into a groove as far as audio and really the whole production process. And, you know, that's really why I started this channel in the first place. I wanted to get back into video and production in general. I didn't want it to feel like this alien and distant thing that I hadn't really done since college. And I also wanted to take the DIY approach to video, which I hadn't really been able to do before, because in college there were certain standards I was expected to meet for a grade, even if I wanted to experiment and kind of go off script. So I was excited to kind of try to take it from a different approach. And so to basically sum up my point with this ramble on the various ideologies and schools of thought on audio and how you can approach it, by just adjusting my thought process on the post-production side, I've been able to stay true to my DIY setup and mission in a new way that I'm really excited about. And I'm really looking forward to being able to share that process from a video perspective, where I previously could only really speak to it from a music perspective. So that's kind of where my head's at this week as far as thinking about new things and process. I'm really excited for the next few videos, which are going to be a series focusing on moving my computer into a new case with some new fans and some other little mods. So be sure to stay tuned for those this coming week. And now, if you have any feelings about this video, be sure to click or type below to let me know. And if you have overall positive, fuzzy, warm inside feelings, be sure to subscribe to get more content like this. But that's all for now. This has been Blitz City DIY.